Welcome back to BAS 120. We're on Chapter 7. This is Part 6, our last part. Just as a recap, we talked about hypothesis testing. We talked about 6 steps. We talked about how similar it was to a court of law where we assume people are innocent and we have to prove them guilty. We assume the null hypothesis, and we have to get a test statistic and see if that test statistic will determine whether we can reject our null hypothesis. And again, as you've seen this graph, if we get a value somewhere in here, a test statistic somewhere here, we would tend not to reject. If we got a value way out here, we would conclude that was so unlikely or so unusual event that we might reject the null hypothesis. And we talked about understanding the risks of doing this, because you can never prove. We talked about flipping a coin. You could flip a coin 100 times and only get one head. There is a probability of that event happening. So there's always the risk, just like in the legal system, there's always a risk of letting an innocent man or a guilty man go free, man or woman. There's always a risk of convicting an innocent person. We talked about how to take the data, how to select a test statistic. We talked about different types of distributions, a t-distribution, a normal distribution. Then we talked about how to draw conclusions. You've got 2 ways. You can compare your test statistic to your critical value, or you can determine the p-value and compare that p-value to your alpha. Then we talked about, well, what about if we have proportional data, categorical data where it's win-lose, same steps, slightly different statistics or formulas. Then we talked about what if we have 2 samples, not just 1 sample. What if we have more? And then we talked about what if we have multiple samples? We're going to use an ANOVA analysis of the variance to understand if we really have a difference. Well, now we're going to talk about, well, what if we have categorical data and we want to understand if there's a difference, i.e. if there's a dependency, if they're independent or dependent on each other. For example, in this case, is there something I could test to see if the age makes a brand preference difference on Ferraris? You know, it may be I'm wasting my time advertising in AARP magazine for the Ferrari. Maybe that's a great advertising tool. Maybe that's the people that can afford the Ferrari. I don't know, but we would test the data to figure it out. And there's a chi-square test, and we go through a bunch of examples in the Excel videos to show you exactly how to do it in Excel. It's relatively straightforward. It comes with a data analysis tool pack, and it gets you the statistics, and we walk you through to make sure you understand what each of those statistics are. So, Chapter 7, we've gone through all of this. It's all the same, in my view, very similar to each one. You just have different scenarios. You might have 2 samples, you might have 1 sample, you might have a t-distribution, you might have multiple samples, you might have categorical data versus numerical data. It's all the same. You just use slightly different tools. And as you go through each example, each of those differences will become clear. Any questions? Let me know.